Hello everyone, I hope you've been enjoying this lovely presentation so far in this event. So today I'm going to be talking about national debt and whether or not that's a crisis or an opportunity for growth in the future. So here we have a graph, and as you can see, our current national debt stands at $31.5 trillion. And the red lines, they represent the recessions that we've had since the year 1966, and how thick the lines are represent how prolonged the recessions have been. And yeah, so this is a piece of data, and I'd like you guys to take a moment to think about what you think of it, and yeah. So, COVID-19 put our government in a $3 trillion deficit, and it definitely put a spotlight on possibly the economic difficulties that our country might be facing. But this might look like a bleak circumstance, but it's better than you might think. So the government sent money to people to try to pay for their food and their rent during times of economic slowdown and times where they couldn't pay for their food or housing. And all this was done without raising taxes, in turn raising the deficit of the country. So government budgets, they really don't work like household budgets. When you owe something to a bank, for example, you are obliged to pay that back, whereas the government owes money to themselves. So let's say you owe money to a bank, and that bank is connected to your house. They can take that house and foreclose upon it if you don't pay your dues. So instead of worrying about what and how we are going to pay for these debts, we should worry about how they're going to help us, and if they help us or if they negatively impact our economy. So Congress has to check its bank account. Congress never has to check its bank account to see whether or not it can afford anything, whether or not it has to look at inflation, or it has to pass a bill. Congress sends the bill to the president, and then if that bill gets passed, the Federal Reserve, the Bank of the United States, it works with the financial system to get the money into the system. And this money is usually digital. It is minted digitally, and with a click of a button on a computer, it's usually released into the system. So, of course, when you think of a deficit, it's generally negative. It means when you take in less money than you're actually spending. And, of course, that does sound negative. So, if we're talking about debt, some of you may think that that leads to problems, and it kind of does. So, it all comes back to inflation, right? So how much money you're releasing into the economy is directly correlated to how well your economy is doing. And if you release too much money into the economy, that leads to inflation, and because the value of the dollar goes down. So when you don't have enough resources to do all the building at once, to do all your projects at once, let's say you're trying to build a bridge, it's important to take these steps slowly, so that you don't start spending lots of money at a time, releasing a lot of money into the system, and competing with the private sector, which raises wages and prices of commodities. So it's very important to understand what money is and how it impacts us. And I think that if we do understand what money does, how it impacts our economy, and if we are careful with inflation, government spending isn't too bad. So in 2020, we had a $3 trillion deficit, but we had the slowest, the shortest recession that we ever had. So, and that led to growth. In 2021, we saw one of the best comebacks We saw a lot of growth in the economy, and this was done with government spending. And now the Fed is trying to work at, once again, shortening the length of a recession. And yeah. So I'd like you guys to think about how inflation might impact your daily lives and what we can do to help shorten the recession and not release as much money into the economy, thus making debt less bad as you think.